Aujourd'hui, je vais parler de whether inflation has a real or perceived impact when we talk about our net worth, especially in the context of hoping to retire early. I mean, if you're on the fire grind, this subject is never far from your mind. But should you or anyone else actually be concerned, especially when inflation flares up, like in this current environment? Hey, Zampak here. Another day not working for the man. I mean, I really count my blessings because I am so lucky to be where I am in life, right? But I know there are plenty of people, even a lot of people who are on the fire journey, who's constantly fretting about things like inflation and how much that'll dent their current or proposed net worth in the future, right? What kind of effect it'll have on our common dream of never having to do a job you don't ever want to again. Some people might be like, hey, you're making a YouTube clip, that's work. Obviously, please watch more of my clips because they're all this shoddily made, proving once again that I just like to rant. And I only rant about things that comes naturally to me. So yeah, no, it's actually quite easy to rant about my preferences in topics because it's definitely play, not work. Okay, tangent done. But I will address inflation today because we're currently in a bit of a topsy-turvy world with a never-ending seemingly type of pandemic and/or endemic and an actual repeat of what seems like a Cold War going hot these days, right? So will your money be worth so much less tomorrow? Because I can see people interested in fire usually are very paranoid about the subject of inflation specifically, right? So let us take a look. Point number one, let me get this one out of the way. Okay? If you keep all your net worth in cash, then yes, inflation over 2 or 3% will definitely destroy that net worth over time, making your fire dreams very short-lived. But of course, how would anyone get to early retirement remotely close to that? With only cash positions is absolutely beyond me. Okay, so yes, in real terms, inflation cuts hard and deep, but only on your cash positions, right? Most likely, it'll only have a marginal impact, if any, on your income-producing or capital gains-making assets, such as stocks or real estate. After all, we all don't trust giant corporations to keep prices down and earn a lower profit margin when their costs go up, right? That's why we invest in those same companies for our gain. If you can't beat them, join them, right? That's an easy enough motto. Companies will be fine, and while some people will complain about rent going up and up, but in our case, we are the landlords, right? So rent going up, once again, can mitigate general inflation as well. So I'm sure there are other investment vehicles, that I can talk about. These two are the tried and true and most obvious, and both can survive trending inflation just fine. So please remember to keep your cash piles reasonably bare, and never ever hold all your net worth in the class of cash. Okay, that's just silly. Okay. Point number two, I actually find it quite funny to hear people talk about, making statements like how a millionaire these days doesn't mean as much as a millionaire from, let's say, 50 years ago due to, of course, inflation. Well, again, that is absolutely true in real terms. In terms of perception, the effect is much less. After all, let's just be clear, 50 years ago is a totally different world, right? So what if a guy from 50 years ago with $1 million might be worth, let's say, it's actually about 7, but let's just call it 10 mil, okay? He still was only living on that in the past, though, without the advances of technology we all enjoy due to progress, right? Think about that for a second. So maybe theoretically, the millionaire 50 years ago could have afforded, let's say, the fanciest boat, compared to a current millionaire who can only buy a middle-of-the-road boat. But because of that thing called technological progress, the middle-of-the-road boat bought now is probably still much better than the best boat from 50 years ago. Does that make sense? My point is, yes, inflation eats away at the absolute value of the dollar, but we human beings like simple definitions that are easy to remember. That's why we like terms like millionaires or billionaires, because it's snappy, okay? Because we know these numbers. Now, if we look at the future, let's go that route. Maybe in another 50 years, maybe we'll need, another really 7 million to equate to $1 million today. But I guarantee in the public discourse, in the media, the term millionaire will still be relevant. After all, let's look at the median household net worth right now, and that's only $120,000. So if we pretend everything's proportional, then in 50 years, let's multiply 120 by 7. Guess what? That still won't even be $1 million, right? And that's not taking into the differences in household net worth due to demographic breakdown in terms of like age or education or other sensitive ways to divide people, right? So having a 7-figure net worth will continue to remain an aspirational goal. Even, that's right, I'm calling it even 50 years from now, okay? For those of us who want to retire early and remain retired, of course we should always aim higher, but we already knew that, right? I don't actually worry about people who are already into FIRE because we're clearly the go-getters of the world, right? By a very wide margin, so we will learn to adapt and deal, okay? Now, my final note, by the way, inflation should actually be able to help consumers in some aspects as well, right? At least, in this narrow field, which is those who are still working and getting raises and also have a mortgage, right? So I'd say at least if you're a little bit past early career, and hopefully that's a lot of people in this group, right now we're in a unique employee favored environment. Anyone who wants to get to FIRE should be aiming to maximize their earnings right now. And at the same time, almost all mortgages are fixed rate mortgages, okay? They are fixed, which means increasing inflation implies you should be making more money while your obligations are comparatively decreasing more rapidly in value. I know this one is actually the toughest observation to feel good about because frankly most people just don't notice how much more money they should have left over because most people value stability over all other virtues to their detriment, right? We live in a chaotic world. Inflation is a reflection of that. So get on board with it and get a better job or a better position, right? If inflation is averaging, let's say 6% or 7% as it looks this year, for example, you need to aim for an increase in pay of at least 10% during years like that, right? By changing jobs or asking for a raise. Compare that against a static mortgage payment, right? Your pay should be increasing, but your mortgage remains the same. So the employee should actually come out ahead and have more money to, go invest, right? So in conclusion, does inflation matter in the long run? No, not really. Not unless you keep all your money in your mattresses, in which case you never ever hit your FIRE goals anyway, unless you're a drug dealer, of course. In that case, you have a whole different set of problems that I cannot really advise on, right? And in terms of public perception, it will take more than my lifetime for simple terms like millionaires to lose its meaning. So let's not kid ourselves. It's still a great accomplishment, right? Does it go as far as it would have done for your grandparents? Maybe not, but that's irrelevant. The world these days is so much smaller and is actually way easier to geographically arbitrage as well, right? So don't worry so much about how we compare to decades past. Just worry about how you can squeeze more money out of what you make and invest that nest egg efficiently, and the market will take care of the rest. Okay, cheers. I'll approach it.